Hi everyone, I'm George Farrar and welcome to JAX 81. Jacksonville as it was in the year 1981. I have the pleasure to bring this year-by-year series spanning from 1975 until 1995 to bring this history series to you. And here we see the Hart Bridge and the shipyards in 1981. So we have a lot to talk about. Here is JIA, Jacksonville International Airport, back in 1981. So as we fly through the year 1981, I'm going to tell you what's ahead. I'm going to talk with you about a big concert. I'm going to talk about growing up in Arlington. I'm going to talk with you about the politics of 1981 and a couple special moments. So get ready, because I have a lot to show you and bring you today. As January 1981 arrived, people were getting ready to have a new president of the United States, Ronald Reagan. He was an actor and former governor of California. Later on in 1981, in March 1981, he would be shot at, but he would survive. On January 20th, 1981, after he was sworn in as president, the country of Iran released 52 of our hostages that had been captured in the United States Embassy in Tehran in November 1979. They had been held for 444 days. As a 6-year-old kid living in Arlington, living in Jacksonville, this was the first national news story I remember. I remember the yellow ribbons. I remember the concern people had and everyone wanting to see the hostages coming back home. President Jimmy Carter worked tirelessly to get them released, working with the government of Iran. There were a lot of complications, there were a lot of issues, the Middle East being, of course, what it was then, and of course, even today, what it is now. So, it was an interesting time. It was something I remember seeing on television. And I would have an opportunity from time to time to talk with my school bus driver, Miss Goodwin, bus 186. And in March 1981, a letter was written, well, more accurately, it was typed. Here it is. This is a letter from the United States Department of State, and I will now read it to you. It says, "Dear Miss Goodwin, I want to tell you how much I appreciate your words of welcome home. I want to thank you for your support and your prayers during all the long months of captivity in Iran. Nothing has been so reassuring to me than to see how the young people of our country have found reason in this experience to renew their commitment to the principles of freedom and liberty and human decency on which our country's future rests. You make me proud to be an American. You make me confident that our country's future is bright. I hope you will also keep an open heart and mind toward Iran so that in time our two countries can again be friends. God bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Bruce Lingan, ex-hostage, a free American." It meant a lot for Miss Goodwin. It meant a lot to me for Miss Goodwin to give me, essentially gave my stepmother, gave me eventually this letter. Here we see the hostages arriving in the United States at Andrews Air Force Base. On February 18th, 1981, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band came to Jacksonville, Florida, and performed at the Veterans Memorial Coliseum. Bruce Springsteen is a musical legend. Later on, I would become a fan. At age 6, I didn't have a chance to go to the concert. I didn't get to go. But it was an amazing day for another reason, though. And it would bring about a very big change in my life. Because, also, on February 18th, 1981, also in Jacksonville, Florida, my family would grow by one. My half-brother was born, Terry John Wayne Farrar. I would, in the early years, know him as TJ, later on, John. And he would have a great role in my life growing up. And so this was a big thing for me growing up in Arlington. Here I am, my rambunctious 6-year-old self, with TJ and my stepmother Pat. We might as well meet the Farrars of 1981. My dad, Terry, was at Channel 4, WJXT, working as a broadcast engineer. My stepmother, he had married her in 1978. She had been a school teacher and with the Duval County school system. And then she, when I came along, when the marriage happened, she stayed at home and raised me. So we have a new addition to the family. We have TJ, and so things are going to be happening down the road, and I'll be filling you in. There's a lot that's going to be happening. All this was happening. My mother had remarried, and I was still doing visits with her, and I'll talk more about that with you in JAX 82. Here we see my stepmother, TJ, and me in front of the house on Morgana Road in Arlington. I had a classic growing up experience in the early 1980s in the Jacksonville suburbs in Arlington. I will be sharing these experiences with you not only in this episode but also in JAX 82 and JAX 83. There's going to be a lot happening. We'll now flash back to the old WJXT TV4 call sign back from the early 1980s. And here I am, front row, center, with my Snoopy shirt, and having a great time in the library of Arlington Heights Elementary School. Went there from 1981 until 1983. First grade and second grade. This is first grade. Here is the Regency Square Library. Now this shows it in the year 1973. Okay, this is not a 1981 picture. This is from 1973. But the library, I do remember it somewhat like this. In the early 1980s, in Arlington, not far from Regency Square Mall, got some of my earliest library books from this library. Now it's time to go back to the early 1960s. Here we see a view of downtown Jacksonville, the St. Johns River. We see the Sears Roebuck and Company had constructed a Sears store right there out on the riverbank, on the north bank. In the distance, we see the Hotel Mayflower, which has since been demolished. We see the Hotel George Washington, we see the Hotel Seminole, and we see the Sears in 1972. So we see downtown. We see what we used to know as the Charter Building, now the JEA headquarters in the distance. Had the rotating restaurant. The Hotel Mayflower to the left would be demolished, I believe, in 1978. We see the Ed Ball Building. We see further to the right, that would have been the American Heritage Life Building to the right, now known as the Lynch Building, now known as the 11 East Building. Now here we see the Civic Auditorium, now known as the Times Union Center for the Performing Arts. We see the Sears. This is in 1981, okay? We see the Federal Building. We see the Atlantic Bank Building, okay? And we see the construction of what would become the Southern Bell Building, now known as the TIAA Bank Center, okay? This is 1981 Jacksonville. A new skyscraper coming, and a change is coming, because the downtown Sears store is going to close for good. Meanwhile, to the east in Arlington, off the Arlington Expressway and Atlantic Boulevard, the Regency Square Mall was thriving. It had opened in 1967. It was a big mall for its time. It was one of the most profitable malls in the late 1970s, early 1980s, and it was going to get even more profitable with the opening in March 1981 of the expansion, which would include a new Sears store, and they relocated Ivy's. Remember Ivy's? There were 90 stores and restaurants that opened in that new wing. So this is a picture of the new Regency Square Mall, essentially, in November of 1981. Notice to the distance, you see the round Regency Square Theater, the Twin Theater. Originally it was a one theater, and then it became a twin theater. And I know I saw a couple movies in that theater. I remember as a kid walking the new expansion, and it was quite a considerable increase in walking. I'll have more to bring you about Regency Square Mall and JAX 82. Let's now take a look at the Jacksonville political scene in 1981. Here we have Mayor Jake Godbold, okay, mayor of Jacksonville, a Democrat, mayor of Jacksonville during this time. He had a lot going on all at once, and so from time to time on this year-by-year series of Jacksonville history, I want to take a look at the Jacksonville political scene and the issues and the times by taking a look at editorial cartoons by Ed Gamble with the Florida Times-Union. I remember seeing these editorial cartoons because my grandfather, back in the early 1980s, was always reading the Florida Times-Union, the newspaper. He lived off of Black Creek in Clay County, and I would visit, and that's where I really began to see some of the different things that were going on in politics, the newspaper. And so here we have, looks like Mayor Godbold as a trying to coerce the dogs here, the City Council and the JEA, Jackson Electric Authority, to jump here. It says here he's saying, "This is the last time I'm going to tell you, get up there and jump." It's kind of interesting because I know that we have had, just in the year 2018, have had a lot of controversy with the possible sale of the JEA and how that had been pulled back from happening, at least right now. But JEA was very much a hot topic even in 1981. Power bills were extraordinarily high. in the mid-1970s, people in Jacksonville got very outraged about it. So there was a lot that was going on involving the Electric Authority, and here you can see it says here, he was despondent over the electric bills, and today we got the new tax assessment. And you have the police officer trying to bring the homeowner down from the top of his house. And notice the TV antennas, okay, back then. Wow. So this was kind of the times that people were living in. A lot of high cost when it came to electricity, but there was also a smell problem, an odor problem. The things were starting to catch up with the city of Jacksonville when it came to industrial smell. There would be smells from industries located on the north side, and we were starting to run afoul of things. And here it looks like Godbold. They have him here has an officer, an army officer, I guess. And he says, "I don't smell nothing, Corporal. You don't either, do you, Private? I can't hear you." And the private is the environmental chief. Okay, so we're going to later on in the 1980s, it's going to start to become more and more of an issue. It's going to start to snowball. People are going to they're wanting things to change in Jacksonville. And so we're seeing some of that, at least so far as opinion and some of the things, seeing that here. These cartoons, these editorial cartoons, are courtesy of the University of North Florida's Digital Commons. Okay, University of North Florida's Digital Commons. Fascinating look into 1981 Jacksonville politics, what was going on at the time. Here we have a commentary on an effort in 1981, a commentary on the effort to bring visitors to Jacksonville using highway billboards. And this cartoon spoofs it a bit with a billboard, a guy painting the billboard saying Jacksonville, bold new city of the South. And behind it, you see these ramshackle shacks. It says 75,000 who live in Jacksonville slums, code violations. You see just a totally messed up kind of neighborhood, and question what solutions are offered by Jacksonville leaders to the problems of growing urban blight. Answer, tried to hide the eyesore. And this is another issue that I think we can see resonate through time. I remember as a kid going down Union and State Streets and seeing the shotgun houses, okay, where you could, they say you could stand on one end of the house, shoot to the back, through the back. You go all the way out to the back of the house, okay? And you'd see that, and then the Ritz Theater at that time had not been refurbished. It had been abandoned. So you would see that as well. So it was definitely, there were definitely these times, these things that were happening. People were starting to speak up about what was happening downtown because, as we've talked about in earlier episodes, the economics of Jacksonville were certainly changing. Lots of business out in the suburbs, less business downtown. In 1981, you could catch the Jacksonville Suns at Wolfson Park. I remember in the early 1980s going to Wolfson Park with my stepmother and enjoying. It was a somewhat warm, humid evening, so that was a unique time, a special time to enjoy. The Jacksonville T-Men played soccer, so there was a lot of different things going on. We had high hopes, I think, for the T-Men and for soccer, just like we're still trying to figure out how to get an NFL team. So at that time, soccer would have to do, and you can see where Godbold and the council, you see back and forth on where are they going to go when it comes to sports. So, okay. Now here is a picture of me in the sanctuary of the Community of Christ Church on Tracy Road in Arlington. Back then it was known as RLDS, the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Here I'm being prayed over by the elders. Pastor Jack Crabtree, who would ultimately baptize me later on in the early 1980s, is standing at the pulpit. And of course we see, to the right, we see my father and my stepmother. These were critical years for me. There were some big challenges that were going to be coming at me very quickly in the year 1982, and I'll be talking with you, of course, about that on our next show. But I just stop at this moment just to point out, as you look in the lower hand corner of this picture, you see a small me, right? I'm only 6 years old when all this is happening. And it was a very exciting time. And I was starting to get out into the world and see Arlington, going to the mall at least every other Saturday, going to church, going to school, so much happening all at once. And having a half-brother, having a new relative in my family. I would know him as my brother. I was excited about all the things that were going on. There were some big things coming ahead. Here we see my class picture at Arlington Heights Elementary. Miss Johnson was a teacher. She drove me home one time because I missed the bus. I'll never forget the day that I missed the bus. But she drove me home. And Arlington was a really safe, I viewed it as a very thriving, happy neighborhood, a happy community, a suburb of Jacksonville. And so, as we take one last look at 1981, let's take a look at an article from either the Jacksonville Journal or the Florida Times-Union. I am in this picture. You won't be able to see it very well. This is in the cafeteria of Arlington Heights Elementary. The date on here is written October 2nd, 1981. My grandfather was an avid reader, as I mentioned earlier, of the newspaper. And so he saw it and, of course, clipped it out. And it says here, Clarence Reese, alias Sparky the Dog, talked about fire prevention yesterday to kindergarten and first grade children at Arlington Heights Elementary School. Reese, a Jacksonville fireman, later donned the head of his dog suit and greeted the students as they left the room. So that was, I remember it. I had a lot of cool times at Arlington Heights Elementary. They also, in this cafeteria, had something called the Math Fair. And I remember very vividly the Math Fair. And I had a good time. There were some neat times at Arlington Heights, and I'm going to have more to bring you. And I want to thank you for taking the time to watch another episode of our year-by-year series as we cruise on into the 1980s. We have a long way to get to. Thanks for watching. Take it easy. See you later.